All right, so we'll talk about some other subjects, something very different, because we're all burnt out on the same old stuff. So I was looking at some pictures of nature and stuff like that recently. Looking at some pictures of nature and stuff like that. It wasn't really a purely natural scene. I think it was like a park or a golf course or something like that. And what's all our reaction to a golf course or a natural scene where the grass is mowed down, but you have trees, something like that. But the grass is down short. Having grass like that, hold that thought. Think about that for a second. Now, of course, a golf course or something like that, or a park, they're manicured, they're artificial, they're landscaped. Right, but they reflect on something natural, a natural scene. Basically, what do they say was humans' natural environment? They say that the savanna, or the plains, the savanna of Africa, if you believe in out of Africa origin. But at any rate, basically somewhere that's mixed forest. Savanna wouldn't be heavily forested because there's too many pests and things like that. You can't move around, you can't see, you can't sense predators, things can drop on you from above. Heavy forest isn't good, it's not good for humans. But out in the open, when you can see stuff, ambush, and you got some cover there so you can ambush prey and coordinate things. Now, when you look out on usually some kind of natural plain, usually the grass, people don't understand this, like grasslands like in the U.S., like back in their original state, they had all these wild grasses. They were a healthy biome. That the grass would be like 12 feet tall and be thick. You'd have to, it'd be really like you couldn't just walk through it, step it down. You have to really pull it apart. It'd be that thick. And that's of course what the large ruminant animals would feed off of. Think about all that biomass, all that grass. You probably have cut your lawn when it gets up a couple inches, and you have bags and bags full of that damn lawn clippings you got to get rid of. Think about 12 feet tall and as thick as it is. Thick, so you got to pull it apart with both hands, right? Think how much biomass that is. So that's the food for large ruminant animals in its original state. There was something like 100 million American bison, roaming, and all over. It wasn't just the Great Plains, because you had mixed species of bison, like wood bison and things like that. They'll go all the way to Pennsylvania and New York and things like that. They go quite far east. But on the Great Plains, you have all these bison. And they go through an area and they would mow that grass down, right? They munch it. Now, different bovines, some of them are picky eaters. I don't know specifics about bison. I'm assuming they go through and they pretty much mow everything down. Sometimes they leave little bits standing here and there, like some species of plants with leaves on it. You see it if you drive through like Texas and Arkansas or Oklahoma. You'll see it like on these ranches, like some of these plants sticking through. Like most of it will be pretty well nibbled down, and you'll see some leafy plants here, some herbaceous leafy plants. I guess whatever it is, the cows don't like it. Cattle don't like it. So, but think about that as a natural scene. You see it mowed down. So I always thought about that. You always look at something that's unnatural, mowed down, like a golf course. It's a basic natural scene. It's got trees and living things in there, but what makes it that seen that mowed grass makes it so appealing? Well, that's just it. Instinctively, it's instinct. You see something like that, you're aware that there's large ruminant animals nearby. There have to be, like in nature. If you see something like that in nature, that's a clue, and it's instinctive that there's large ruminant animals around mowing that down, because that's the only thing that can take it down in nature, other than fire. So isn't that interesting? I was thinking about that the other day. How long were humans hunting large ruminant animals? Or it's longer than we've been called. You're going by secondhand evidence and trying to make inferences from imperfect clues in evidence. Then it's often foolhardy. But what do most of them say? That humans in their modern form, 200,000 years, 300,000 years? Because it's changed in recent years. They've gone back and supposedly found new evidence. Before they used to say, modern humans aren't more than 20,000 years old. And now they were saying, no, it goes back a ways. And the other hominids have gotten pushed back. But I think even those were hunters. Who were the first ones that hunted large animals, large ruminant animals? Was it Homo habilis? I think that's right. Because that's why they call him habilis, because it comes from hand or tool, right? That's a Latin term. So he's making tools. He's the one that's sharpening rocks and making better rocks from the crappier rocks and fashioning them into spears. And spears aren't used as a gardening tool. You probably get the vegans would say, no, that's a hoe. They were there to scrape the ground so they could grow cabbage. Just ridiculous stuff. And no, it's so humans could, or our ancestors, hominids, if you believe in that sort of thing. Now, I got another point to make about that, about evolution. And nobody's ever brought this up, because usually it takes a religious tone or a tone of defiance for different reasons they don't believe in it. Different basis of their argument. My argument is, so they find evidence that are morphological changes in the, all they're finding is fossilized bones. Now, there are certain modern humans now that have smaller cranial capacity. They're just, unfortunately, they're the victims of disease like microcephaly. But I'm not sure how small their cranial case is. But how well can they tell something like that, or some other type of deformity from modern humans that we don't have now? Maybe there's some other type of malnourishment or some toxin they were exposed to in their natural environment that would cause them to be deformed and look a different way, have a completely different morphology. Nobody ever addresses that. Nobody does. You see, what's the new one? The little hobbits, they call them hobbits. Homo florensis, I think it is. And they found it in the field. They're saying, well, this skeleton's so small. It's only 4 feet tall or 3.5 feet tall. Have any of these guys, where did they find it? They found it in the Philippines, right? Or Philippine archipelago or Indonesia. They're really kind of share a bloodline. They're what are called more generally Malay, of the Malay group. Not to be confused of Malaysian proper, but the Malay ethnic group. And all you got to do is just go down and walk down the street in the Philippines, and you can see what's the average height there. Now, I've seen plenty of people that are between 4.5 feet to 5 feet tall, and I'm not seeing the ones that are less fortunate. These are the guys that are walking around, they're working, they're healthy enough to function, right? I don't see the ones that have some kind of malnutrition or deformity, right? You wouldn't be that much shorter if you did. 4 feet, right? If you're just nutritional deficient, it's not even, it needs to be a major thing. People think that's like a severe thing. It could just be having fewer calories as you're trying to grow. Like look at all these children of the vegans, like on all these channels, and it's really sad to watch. And you can tell their hair's falling out, or their skin and bones, or they're not growing over time. This kid hasn't changed 2 or 3 years. He's the size of a 4-year-old, and he's 7 years old. That's what happens. You don't get, I wouldn't say optimal nutrition, but sufficient nutrition to grow into adulthood. You get morphological defects, a smaller skeleton. So what would that be, like 3.5 feet, 4 feet tall? Okay, so how do you know that the skeletons that you're finding are just pretty much not far off from modern Filipinos? No offense, people are saying, oh, well, it's a racial offense to Filipinos. Absolutely not. Just the shortness of stature, and the average shortness of stature. Because they're finding a skeleton and saying, well, it's 4 feet tall, it's a different species. People should be offended at that. How come they're never offended? Like, you have this cancel culture, right? And every time you go to a anthropology museum, what color are the primitive hominins? What color are they? Right? They always depict them as brown and black, don't they? Look at that. Do they ever get accused of racism? You ever say, oh, well, what is it with you guys? Every single primitive hominin is black, we're primitive to you? No, you never see them criticized on that basis, huh? Isn't that convenient? You can see who's backing who on that. That's how you can tell. They're not held by the same standards. They're not playing by the same rules. They can just say whatever they want. And believe me, look at this. They get off on this. That's a sly insult. Believe me, that's done on purpose. You'll never see primitive hominins being depicted as white. The only exception is they'll say, well, sometimes, and that's before, they're changing it now. Sometimes they had the Neanderthals. You're like, okay, well, we're primitive whites too. Now they're changing now. They're like, oh, no. You notice that? Especially the ones, what was it in Britain? I don't think they were Neanderthals, but they're saying ancient Britons were all very dark-skinned. Now, skin's not got much to do with it. But they're all trying to change them. Like, look at the picture. And they're trying to change them, basically all the features and stuff like that. They're trying to change the race of ancient Britons and things of that nature. And so they've changed Neanderthals too. And they're making them black. So what's the message? What are we supposed to think of that? That's a takeaway. It's a race. It's a racial slight, really. They're saying, well, this is the less advanced. This is the more primitive version of humanity. It's brown and black, and they evolved. I'm trying to say it without laughing. Yeah, it really is. That's the message. It's terrible. So I'm not the one that came up with it. They're the ones who say, oh, it's just a matter of your perception. Well, show me how I'm wrong. Show me how I'm wrong. Every single one of them is depicted all one way, right? Aren't they? And it's Ooga Booga. It's definitely on the sly, tongue-in-cheek joke, racial joke, and not a very funny one, right? But they never get called out on it, right? And none of these anthropologists, they get their careers taken away? You're saying, well, what, you're saying blacks are primitive? Right? Do they get their careers taken away? No. They, like I said, they're not playing by the same rules, just like they apply to everybody else. So they're right there. It tells you, right? It tells you it's about something else. It's about hidden factors. rather than the stated ones. You'll say, well, you're going to be canceled in this basis. No, believe me, you're being canceled for another reason. They're just using it as a tool to attack you because they know that it's a pretty good tool to attack people with. And so far, most people are just cowards. They're not going to argue with it. They're not going to fight back on that basis. So, well, you're racist or you're this and that. Now, I say it's wearing off, and believe me, that's why it's getting more and more intense these days. Like the cancel culture, the wokeism, and they're using these tools to attack people, like these slur words. So you're right, you're bigot, homophobe, Islamophobe, and this and that. That's the reason it's getting more and more intense is because it's not working to the same degree. It's just like a drug, right? When you initially do a drug, it's fun, it's great, it's powerful, it works. Tiny doses, it works, and then you build up a tolerance to it, don't you? And it doesn't work as well. Then you got it more and more and more, and it doesn't work at all. Then you're taking gigantic doses. Look at these steroid guys. That's a good example of it. Look at junkies on the street. Why do you think they go broke and spend all their money, all their life savings on drugs? They need more and more and more. They need gigantic dosages. They need huge amounts of it to get the same effect. Yeah, it's the same thing with using political correctness to attack people. Using political correctness as a weapon to attack people, destroy their careers, sick mobs on them, things of that nature. At first it was great. You didn't really have to try. All you had to do was create some innuendo, create some rumor. This guy, I think he might be racist. Let's see, guys, he better be, and everybody would be on him, right? Oh, fuck this guy. Nowadays, you actually do have people fighting back. It's like, look, fuck you. You're gonna call me this and that and that. Go fuck yourself. Finally, they're stepping up. And so, what's the response? So there's more and more and more of the cancel culture of trying to use extreme amounts of political correctness to try to get the same. They're like desperate. They're like, it's not working. People aren't attacking this guy. We haven't ruined him yet. Oh, think of some new terms to call him. Send a mob over to this house. Get him fired. I'll pay you money to get him fired. Whatever it takes. Plant drugs on him. Something. And now people are just fed up. Look at Great Britain. That's another thing. Do you think they give a flying fuck anymore? Nah, because they don't have anything. A lot of them don't have anything left to lose, right? So that's how far they'll push before they'll give up political correctness, and before they'll give up, wokeism as a tool to attack and control people. Before they'll give it up, they'll ride this dog to the bitter end. And who knows what type of extreme measures they'll go to and stuff they'll come up with. And that's why I think people are like, well, I better get ready. There might be riots. There might be loss of civil order, things of that range. I don't think it's that bad of an idea to be prepared. I never did too much, but you got to understand, do it in a controlled fashion, not get carried away with yourself. But the basics and stuff like that, and be vigilant. Yeah, absolutely, because there is a danger of that. Now we've already seen that. Now they've only been able to do it in a controlled fashion. Well, that's a bad word for it. I say a limited fashion, in certain areas and things like that. And here's another weird thing. People don't think that it's, like these, BLM's one of it. It's not always BLM. It's just these riots. They're always left, though. People don't think that it's controlled by, hidden elites or controlled by some hidden forces or groups. Well, how come they all play by the same rules? You'll see them come out and use their fists and even use deadly weapons. They'll throw rocks, they'll throw incendiaries and stuff like that. You don't see any of the left like the Antifa. You don't think they're centrally directed. How come none of them come out with guns in these riots and start firing them off in the air and doing stuff like that? They don't have that much of an affinity for guns, do they? No, you almost never see it. Now, you'll see some exceptions, and those are just individuals or small groups that are not really part of, they're not getting the directions from higher up. But 99.99% of the time, you'll see them with this odd type of restraint. They'll do everything else, break every other law in the world, burn down buildings, assault people, use deadly weapons to assault people, but they won't pull a gun, will they? You think that's a little bit odd? Do you think that makes sense? Do you think that's rational? No. So right there, you tell you, okay, if it's not rational, either the person that's doing isn't rational, which is to a point, yeah, that's true. But there's a bigger picture usually. Rationality there's a part of it that you're not considering. Your model is incomplete, basically. You're trying to analyze something. You're like, I don't quite get this, right? Then there's some other factors that you need to consider that you're leaving out and you're just not getting. So, that's the gist. How do we get on this topic? I'm just rambling. See, when I come out here, I make these. I'm just walking. I'm just talking into a Sony voice recorder. I don't get in the habit of carrying smartphones everywhere because when I want these to break on social media, even there might be some unreleased ones. When I want them to break, I want them to be exclusive. If you're talking into a smartphone, they're already hitting somebody else's computer before they hit before you even start editing them. They already know. And see, that's the thing. That's a very small point. Now, nobody really cares about, what I'm talking about here. But it's good to have good habits. Whenever you're doing any kind of creative work, do it on devices they can't spy on, no matter what the creative work is. Because how many times, I'm sure it's happened a lot of times to people, they actually come up with something good. Oh, look, somebody beat you to the punch, so they already beat you to it, like, usually it doesn't, not that far behind you, before you can come out with your stuff. You see a cheap copy come out, right? Like, shit. How'd they know? Yeah, I wonder how they knew. They're spying on you 24/7 now. That's neither here nor there. Like I said, getting distracted. So like I said, I ramble quite a bit. I'm just out here walking, and this might end up at the cutting room floor. But my original point was, why was something that's artificial, something that looks beautiful but is artificial in some way? You can't say, well, it's not a natural scene. Why does it appear beautiful? Because it's actually closer to a natural scene that most of us won't see, unless you go to a ranch or something like that and you can see the field like nibbled down. But even that pales in comparison to natural grasslands, herds of hundreds, millions of bisons. Now, what was I going to say about ruminant animals? Right. If you're tracking ruminant animals, how long have humans or human-like creatures have been hunting and tracking large ruminant animals? My point was, longer than we've been of the form of a modern human, right? Certainly 500,000 years or something like that. Depending on what kind of timeline you go by, we'll just use a standard timeline just to appeal to all the normies and stuff. Because at the end of the day, like I said, none of us know for sure. It depends ultimately what you have confidence in or faith in, right? I'd say neither. But we're going to have to put a number on it. A couple million years hunting large ruminant animals. So do you think in a couple million years an animal develops an instinct for something? Has anybody trained successive generations of animals? I think I've heard about this. It's not Pavlov's dog, because I'm not talking about a single animal. I'm talking about you teach an animal something, and its parents they find it so useful because they're not as dumb as they look. It's not as dumb as people make them out to be. That animal finds that whatever you've taught them so useful, they teach it to their offspring. They actually do experiments like that with birds. Like they taught them like some kind of artificial language that wasn't their song, but something that they could mimic, right? I think it was parrots or some shit. And the parrots actually went and taught their offspring this artificial language without the intervention of the scientists. And it's pretty cool. And that was something that wasn't it's not apparent that it's immediately useful. It's just interesting to the animal. They probably thought, wow, they were so wowed by it, they were teaching it to their offspring. But that can get carried down. You're talking about behavior, getting carried down, like learned behavior. How long does it have to be? Because you're going to have learned behavior, right? And some of the creatures are going to do it well, and some of them are going to stumble, and they're not going to do as well. They might not be as successful and have as many offspring and that sort of thing. The ones that just pick it up right away, like they have kind of an instinct for it, right? Just like these little children in school. There's like, no way can this kid fully understand what he's repeating. He's just very good at repeating that, and he has some rudimentary understanding of it. He's just very good at naturally having a rudimentary understanding. We see that child prodigies. This one's a whiz at math. This one has talent in this and that, right? This one's actually has talent in athletics. Now, naturally, if you got a bunch of animals teaching learned behavior to the offspring, the ones that are better, just naturally take to that. They're going to do better as far as reproducing themselves. And that gene's going to, whatever it is, if it is genetic, it's going to proliferate into the population, right? And eventually it's going to get better and better until something comes up against it. Other factors are going to come into play. Like it might compete with other genes that make it successful. Things like that. It's quite dynamic. You're going to have to, it's like really like optimization, and some things they're trade-offs and some things are opposed to other aspects, even though they're both really optimizing the fitness of an organism, right? You have multiple things. We all have. We see that in humanity, right? Diversity of types of fitness, adaptations for fitness. Anyways, how long do you think it takes to change the instinct of a population of animals by successive breeding of generations? Under the conditions which that instinct gives it a powerful reproductive advantage, right? I think very quickly. I mean, you're not 10 generations at most. I mean, that's being extreme. I think it's something that very rapidly proliferates. You know, it depends on how much of an advantage it gives it too. You know, if it makes the animal if that adaptation actually absolutely makes that animal like, what's the incel name? What's the elixicism name for it? Giga Chad Thundercock or whatever. And those genes are going to proliferate very quickly in a small amount of time, small succession of generations, I think. So I think there's instincts in human nature that they're not going to tell us about. They don't, because they always say, you know, for years, like the scientists or academia's official stance on it was, oh, well, humans have no, like the evolutionary psychologists and things like that, humans have no instincts other than a little infant baby. When you touch the middle of its hand, it'll grasp your finger. That's it. That's the only one, or a sucking reflex, and you have to get the milk. That's it. Everything else is learned. Now, I know that's for a fact. That's BS, 100%, because, like I said, I don't know how many people have ever tried doing things like, look, throwing things and being able to hit like a small target, like, you know, look at basketball or stuff like that. That's kind of the same instinct. Throwing rocks and being able, like, drilling nail like instinct. You're not trying to, because that's a complex parabola, right? You're not sitting there doing the algebraic equations to find the roots of that parabola, right, to strike the target. You do that instinctually. Be able to hit a target by throwing something. And that's a unique human adaptation, by the way. The way the arm and the shoulder is to be able to throw. Chimps and gorillas can't do that. They have to, they could throw like overhead by throwing way over to the side, but you're not going to be able to hit anything. So it doesn't matter what kind of instinct you have. Now, I don't know how many people out there tried archery. I mean, not getting a space bow with the compound wheels and everything on there and electronic gadgets. No. Getting a real recurve or longbow or something like that, and doing it by instinct. Because let me tell you something, you can aim like them. Aiming and hitting something with a bow, there's quite a bit of instinct involved in that. You can feel it when you do it. Because if you do it and you kind of try to get a feel of how to optimize it to hit the target, you kind of experiment and do different things to get in the groove to where you're trying to master the skill a little bit. You're trying to figure out, okay, what's the trick, what's the knack here? You'll get there in a very short amount of time. And you'll be able to get there in a very short amount, unless you're a complete klutz or something like that. Now, there's people like that, that's fine. But I think most people will be able to shoot that bow to where they can hit like a dinner plate size thing at 20 yards. And in a couple days at most. I stand by that too. I know I did. I mean, I got it. It probably didn't take me, a couple dozen arrows to figure it out. I mean, maybe not even a dozen arrows. And I was hitting that target inside the ring that was about that size. It was about 10 inches. And people will say, oh, that's not that good. Well, that's good enough to be useful. I mean, and that's the other thing. My point is, the instinct's there. I didn't know anything about it. I'm not calculating the parabolic equations for that arrow flight, and I'm not counting for wind resistance and crosswind and stuff like that, and calculating how many, exact. No. You're doing it by the seat of your pants. And what's the seat of your pants? It's instinct. So, that's something like throwing spears, throwing rocks, shooting arrows. It's all similar stuff. I think, for however long humans have been hunting, I think that's a deeply ingrained instinct in it. And what the vegans would say, oh no, that's just to throw the bad fruit away. I don't know. They have an excuse for him because you want to get that bad fruit way away from you, right? Because you got to adapt to throwing it well. No, they don't have an answer for that. Of course not. My point is, it's instinctual. It's instinctual, and it's related to hunting, and it's related to hunting large animals. Because here's another thing people don't get, unless they think about it. Maybe they're primitivists and things of that nature. Is that we've gone through mass extinctions of animals since humans have been around hunting them, and that hasn't led to extinctions. It's just that you have the same thing that hurt populations now, like diseases and environmental change and things of that nature. Competition from other animals. People don't think about that. They think, well, there's lots of plants out there for all the plant-eating animals. They're never in competition with each other. BS. There's herbivoric competition quite a bit. And if one of the animals, they have both the same food source, it's different species. If one of the animals can't drive the other ones out, then it's screwed. And it can't get to the food source as well as the other ones can. They're screwed. I mean, look at giraffes. They've got that long neck. And how do you think they got it? None of the other animals can get up to those heights and get at the leaves in the tree and eat it. Just them. Shit, I can't walk on grass. I'm in sandals, and if I walk on this clover, I'm going to get a bee right in between my toes. I know it. It sucks. So, saying about hunting large ruminant animals. She got, what are the primitive weapons? Spear, just throwing a spear. Then like an atlatl, which is a spear thrower. Then you had the bow and arrow. And you might want to throw a sling in there, but that's more of a harassment weapon. I guess you could hunt with it. So you have these large animals. When you think about the ones you could get close enough, they got to be pretty large and fairly dumb, or you're going to be able to trick them somehow to get close enough where you can throw a spear, or you get not just one guy, because you're trying to get a group of half a dozen, a dozen, 2 dozen, depending on the size of your tribe. You're trying to get everybody teamwork. Just start chucking spears. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this in real life, but there's a movie called Africa Audio. It's ADDIO. It's about post-colonial. They might show it in college now, but it's kind of politically incorrect enough where they might not. But it's about the decolonization of Africa in the 1960s, when all these powers were, here's your independence, and it's taken off, and the kind of chaos that caused after they're all kind of in shambles. And one of them that showed there's no game wardens anymore, and it's shown like these guys are going out. They're like, okay, there's nobody to stop us. We're going to hunt this elephant. And it was the black natives in the area. Because before they were saying, well, they were restrained by colonial powers. The game wardens, they would stop the natives from doing it. They're like, no. I don't know if you know this, guys know this, but here in the U.S., it depends on what state you're in, but if you are of Native American ancestry, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, you do not have to abide by game laws on any kind of land, public land. Of course, there's different laws about your private land. You have more liberties there. But if you're Native American, you do not have to get a hunting license. So that's one thing that's interesting. But but anyway, in these colonial powers, they didn't go by that. They weren't like the United States, where they've recognized, they've made social inroads. It was just everything was in shambles. Anyways, hold on a second. Oh, good God. Okay. They restrained the natives. They're like, you have no right to hunt, even though they're a native. So once the colonial powers took off, there's nobody restraining these guys. They were just going wild. I don't use politically incorrect terms. They're just having a ball there. So it shows these guys, they all have a bunch of spears, and they're all chasing this elephant. They're all going in a circle. They make this big giant circle where the elephant can't see, and then they close in. Like, I don't know, the circle's got to be a couple miles across. And I don't know how they're coordinating this, yelling or whatever, but they're all the way around. They've already got the elephant surrounded, and they all come in and close in until they've got that elephant surrounded, and they're all just throwing these spears, and spears are hitting this elephant. It's going nuts. And there's blood, and it's quite a scene. But at least it gives you some insight about this is an insight to primitive hunting, how they must have hunted megafauna with spears, woolly mammoths, that sort of thing. So, like I said, there's disadvantages to throwing a spear. It's only going to work on certain animals in certain conditions. You're going to have certain tactics. Animals got to be big and slow. You got to be able to corner it somehow and get close. Because a spear, when you throw it, it's not fast. An animal, if it's a small animal, it can dodge the spear. I don't know if anybody has experience with archery hunting. One time I went out with a bow, and I didn't know this. But I lined it up, I got a shot on it, and it fired at this doe. It heard the shot, and whenever they get in their flight reflex to take off, of course, by natural kinetics, the deer will duck down and get ready to jump. So it'll duck down at its shoulders, and its whole body at the front of it will dip down, 6 inches or something like that. And I shot that arrow, and that sucker dipped down. It heard the shot, and it ducked down, and the arrow just went like an inch right over its shoulders, and then the deer took off. I was like, dang it, I didn't know they could do that. But yeah, they can dodge an arrow. They can hear it, and if they're aware of your presence, they can dodge an arrow. So that's how a small animal. A deer is 120 pounds or something like that. At least this one was. It's nimble enough that it can dodge. By the time you release your projectile, it can dodge and not be where you aimed it at, right? And that's especially true with a spear. You got a large, heavy spear. It's a lot slower than an arrow. And if you're trying to throw that at a small animal like a deer, you'll never hit it. You won't have any chance. With an arrow, all you have to do is aim a little bit lower. If I would have aimed lower, I would have gotten the deer. No big deal. Shooting at rabbits with a bow and arrow, that's a different thing. That's tough, unless you have a bow that's very quick. Like that's when you might need a compound or a very good composite horn bow or something. You want fast arrows, because rabbits can dodge even more quickly than a deer can. But most animals and most everything around today can dodge a spear. Now you're probably going to say, well, no, I saw that Tim bow hunter guy on YouTube, and yeah, okay. Fake videos for fake clicks. Not going to go into that. Besides, most of those, even if they are real, it's under extreme circumstances using a carbon fiber spear with a steel tip. That's a little bit different. And also, most of the time, he uses the atlatl, which is my next point. You know, the next step up from throwing a heavy spear is using the atlatl, which makes it a little bit faster, makes it be able, you get more distance too. So that was the next innovation to come in. And so you can hit animals that are further away, so if they don't have the instinct to understand that you're a danger at 60 yards or whatever, then they're dinner. Those are the ones that are going to be hit. And of course, the atlatl dart's a little faster, so you can hunt a little bit smaller animals, and then the megafauna that you need, that spears will work on, regular spears. And so it kept on going down, and then of course the bow, you can hit, it's faster, the arrow is faster than that atlatl dart, so you can hit even, and it's better range too, you can hit even smaller animals that have better reflexes, because the arrow is faster. They might hear you, might move. They can only move so much by the time the arrow gets there. Like I said, I could have hit that deer if I knew that they jumped the string. All I would have had to do is aim a few inches lower, and I would have been skinning that deer. So I don't know if the audio is shitty in here or what. Let's move over here. I'm gonna sit down because, like I said, I've been walking. But what was I gonna say? Instinct. My whole point about that is instinct, human instinct. They say, oh well, it's just a sucking reflex and that's it. A BS. You have a great instinct to hunt, and of course, why that's politically incorrect, right? Isn't it? Because they're all going to tell you, oh well, no, you ate plants in nature. You ate kale. You ate spinach. That's what people lived on. That's what the Indians lived on, right? Because I don't know any of the listeners out there. You know, here in North America, you know, the eastern part of it, you kind of have a great story tradition, oral story tradition about, you know, the Indians did this and Indians did this. Particularly the Shawnee, as we're in the Ohio River Valley. Like, oh, the Shawnee used to do, this is how they lived off the land, or this is how they used to hunt, this is how they used to grow this and that, how they grew corn. Which, okay, the vegans are hopped on that one, the Three Sisters, right? Kind of go on a sidetrack here. That's okay, it's what we're here for. Come up with fun stories. The vegans always say, oh, well, no, the Indians, I'm going to call them the Indians. American Indians. Or just Indians. Or say the Shawnee. Shawnee, we used to grow Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and that's what they subsisted on. And they're going, like, it's easy to grow. You know, of course, they're grown together. People don't know. The corn or maize, we call it corn here in North America. It's no difference, hard or soft. It's both corn. That formed the bean pole for the beans to climb on. And the squash has those big leaves that give a cover so weeds can't grow up, and gives it shade, keeps the roots cool so there's not too much evaporation and stuff like that. Right, pretty cool. And yeah, that might have been how they grew it, but I think the vegans get lost on the idea of why they were doing that, and it's to have a hedge against starvation in case, you know, because when you are rely on populations of animals and hunting animals, something can happen that's not related to your skill as a hunter. Something can happen to this population of animals and they could collapse. Something, you know, they might have a virulent disease that year. Look at chronic wasting disease. I don't think that's new. But my point is, it's a hedge against starvation. That way, at least you have some form of protein now. As imperfect as it is. In the beans, you got some supply of potassium in the squash, and carbohydrates in the squash, and just basic carbs in the corn. All right, it's something to fill your stomach. But what they won't tell you, the vegans won't tell you, is they didn't get all the tradition right. They don't know that the Shawnee grew large fields of the Three Sisters, but also just corn, that they wouldn't touch. It was sacred, right? And they have it in this area, that area. And they also plant trees. They also, another food source they had from nature, was American hickory nut, which is almost gone. What was it? Black walnut, beech nut. No, hickory. No, did I say hickory nut? American chestnut's almost gone. Hickory and chestnut. Right? Those nuts were a valuable food source, not just to the people, but also the animals. It's what they call mast. Whatever forest you're going to have mast, it's either some kind of nuts or acorns. It's going to be a food source for these ruminant animals during the wintertime. They don't starve. Because what the hell else are they going to eat when you've got snow on the ground and stuff like that? And there's nothing green at all. You know, humans can store food. They can run and store food. These animals, deer and other animals, they collect those acorns and nuts, of course. There's just not too many of those nut trees around, other than black walnut. You see that around, and you see lots of acorns, red and white oak, bur oak and stuff. But that's what the animals here use as food source, and that might be another reason. Like I was saying earlier, you know, you see a field that's nibbled down. It's beautiful because out of instinct, you know there's food source around, right? Just like those animals, when they see they're drawn to acorn, whatever the scent is, they're drawn to that. They don't have really deep thought processes. They have some memory and stuff like that, and know how to get around. And eventually, they'll bungle into a tree and they'll remember it. They might mark it with scent. That's also the reason they use scent, because they don't rely on deep episodic memories like we do. Humans and birds are the ones that do that, but other animals, they're more instinct driven. Let's see, right as I'm talking, there's some squirrels over there gathering. I wonder what that is. And there's a black walnut tree. There's also acorns and stuff. But anyways, that's kind of neat. Wow, I wish I had a. What do you think of when you see little animals? I think of shooting an arrow or a bullet, getting some meat. I don't know. You know what? I'm unapologetic about that, and it's always been like that since I was a little kid. Just had a real strong hunting instinct. When I see animals, like I throw it and see if I can hit it with a rock. If I didn't have a weapon, like, oh man, see if I can nail that thing, right? It was powerful, man. And, it's politically incorrect, even like back in the 80s and 90s, it's still politically like, no, it's mean. Fuck, it is. It's natural. Getting meat's natural, and you better do it when you can do it, right? So people say, oh, you don't have to be like that all the time. Yeah, I do. I sure the hell do. If there weren't people in here, I would be nailing those damn squirrels with a sling or something. Get some water here. So, where's I going with that? Yeah, the Shawnee grew. They were like, oh, they grew the vegans will say, oh, they grew the three sisters. And that's what they ate. They didn't shoot the nice little deer and everything like that. They didn't fish, or if they did, they were ignorant. They didn't have to do that. Few of them have the balls to say that, to morally condemn like indigenous practices. Like, well, they weren't vegan. No, we're not talking about them. They'll usually try to change the subject or something. But you can't change it here. So they would say like. The vegans would say, Shawnee grew these three sisters and that's what they ate. Now, like I said, most of what they planted was sacred. They didn't touch it. Now, most people, I don't know if you can see what I'm getting at here. Like I said, they plant nut trees too. Not only as a food source. What they do is they do that to attract the animals. I don't know if any of you have ever grown a garden before. Eventually the deer will show up. The rabbits sure the hell will show up. Eventually you get the deer to show up. And what you need to do, if you can look into your state's game laws, you can get what's called crop damage control tags. This is just, I'm going down a digress here, but it's important. And as you grow a little garden, you get crop damage control tags. You can hunt out of season. You're on your own property. Usually you have to have so much acreage, but not if they're out there damaging your crops. So grow a crop for the vegans and do your crop deaths. You can benefit from the crop deaths there, even if you're not a professional farmer. You can shoot some deer out of season. So, where was I? Oh yeah, that actually comes from, it's a cherished Native American practice. It wasn't just the Shawnee. They would grow sacred fields that nobody would touch. Of course, what's that going to do? Well, it's going to attract, based on what you planted there, it's going to, in the summertime, it's going to attract birds. You have some kind of seeded crop. And it's going to attract the damn deer. They're going to be all over it. Now, what they would do, they let the deer be all over it. That's for the deer. So, you're in a situation where it's a fine line of what's going on here. Are they living off the land, or is this animal agriculture? Because they're not tame, they're not pinned, but they're let alone and they're attracted there and they're fed. They certainly are fed. You leave them alone. They're sacred. That's why they call it. That's what the elders would tell everybody: don't mess with this. That's what it means. It's sacred means you don't mess with it. This is the way we do, and we're not changing it. If you go against it, it's going to be your butt. Try not to censor myself too much. Huge cornfields. Now, what do they do in the West? Now, what do we do in modern times? We grow monocrop. We grow the corn. We go and wait for it to mature and harvest it, and then take the grain, and then they have the animals penned and do all this other stuff, and then feed you let them. Usually, if it's cattle, you let them graze till they get a certain weight. And you send them to the feedlot, and you give them what? You give them corn that you did all that work and all that shipping, all that stuff to harvest and all that. But at the end result, you're still doing the same thing. I mean, the Shawnee would not even bother. Just like let it alone in the field. The deer will come to it. Basically, they'll find out where the corn is. Leave them alone, and they had everybody on the same page. Don't everybody mess with them. In fact, don't even go over there. Let them, because you want to spook them out of the area. We want them to come into the area. And then, of course, during the summertime, here's the other thing. The Native Americans in the eastern woodlands, the eastern United States, they would settle around major sources of water. You'd have to be around a river or major lakes, because that would provide transportation, but not only transportation, but a major source of food in the summertime, warm months. They would fish. They'd fish. And they would have other sacred fields that would attract birds, and they would have the kids have either blowguns or bows and arrows. The arrows had didn't have a stone point on it, didn't have a blunt tip or have a blunt stone, what they call a bird point. So you give that, and you tell the kids to go over to the sacred field where the birds are coming to wherever they plant. They knew what to plant to attract the birds. And this is at a time too when you had passenger pigeons. Now I don't know if you've heard about passenger pigeons, but basically until they went extinct, conventional wisdom will say, oh well, that was just dumb idiots hunting them to extinction. Well, it certainly didn't help their numbers, but there's vast areas, like even now, there's vast areas that just no people even go into. Vast areas of wilderness. And it's either just agriculturally it's not productive or economical to develop, or it's protected, it's some kind of national forest or whatever. But they wouldn't have gone extinct. What caused them to go extinct is the loss of the American chestnut, and that was their major food source. Nobody ever talks about that, right? See, you're learning stuff that you can hear here. You won't hear this anywhere else. You'll never hear that. But go look it up. If you actually dig and go research that, you'll find out, yes, the loss of the American chestnut was a major factor in the extinction of the passenger pigeon. I would say the factor, because there's so much anti-hunting stuff and veganism and stupid animal rights stuff, how much they harp that up. I bet it wasn't even a factor. I think it's more of deforestation and loss of the American chestnut, which, believe me, around the turn of the century, like 1900, there's quite a bit of deforestation if you go and look. And it was only through conservation efforts that it made it come back. Like all of Pennsylvania. You drive through Pennsylvania, look at all that forest. That's all the result of rehabilitation. That had all been cut down, almost all of it, at one time. And as hard as that is to believe. Now saying that, so there was lots of habitat, but the American chestnut, that was really wiped out by a fungus that was brought here. I forget what it's called, but I digress. Getting back to the Shawnee, and so they would have the kids. They have whatever they know where the chestnut trees, or maybe they had some kind of crops that they planted to attract birds. Because there are certain things you can track, and believe me, the birds will be all over them. Big, huge, giant flocks that blacken out the sun. And you'd send the kids over there to hunt the birds. A passenger pigeon, I think, Cornish game hen, about that same size. They're not small. These passenger pigeons, they're like, if you saw a regular common pigeon today, they're going to be a little bit bigger than that, or they would have been a little bit bigger than that, right? So you get the kids over there, the boys, to go over there and give them their little kid bows and their with the bird points on them and their blowguns. I don't know if the Shawnee used blowguns. Cherokee did. So go over there, they can practice up, get as many birds as you can. You're not going to hurt anything. There's giant flocks of them. You're not going to, and have fun. And they're learning valuable skills. Like I said, some of it's instinct, but to do it well, you have to learn and practice. Okay, you can greatly improve things that are even instinctual. So, meanwhile, the men would be. I don't know if it was the men or the women. It's different for different tribes, so I can't remember what the Shawnee did. But anyways, the adults would be fishing. They would go to wherever their major water source was, and whether it be the Lake Erie or what it was, Ohio River, or Olentangy, or Scioto, as it's properly pronounced. Whatever bodies of water they would settle around, and they would fish, and that would be a major source of protein in the summer months. And then they'd let the deer come around the sacred fields, getting fat on that stuff the whole summer. And then in the fall, when birds would migrate out, and of course fish would do whatever they do, die off or bed down or migrate or whatever. And basically that's not viable. Then it's time to hunt the deer, all the deer and the other animals, because there's other things that normal people wouldn't think to hunt, like raccoons and things. That they're actually pretty good because they have a lot of body fat. They're very greasy. But a lot of people don't know, that's where our game laws came from, Native American traditions. You see, they knew the patterns that they could follow or given to them by their elders that would work. That they could find the food sources they need to support the tribe that they would live off of. And they could live more in harmony with nature, or more with nature than against it, rather than just hunting out an area and then trying to move around. They would do that. They would say, well, look, we can get the game to come to us if we all work together. These are the sacred fields, don't touch them. And they all stick to the plan, and they all did. So that's the story. Yeah, it's pretty neat. That's where their game laws came from. Now, a lot of people don't know. Those initially, a lot of the wildlife, a lot of the deer and stuff, there really weren't any game laws. It's kind of a balance. I don't know if it was a lot of areas that was shot out, the game was shot out, and a lot of areas there was a lot of game left, and it was kind of imbalanced just by the random chance. People would not that many people be interested in hunting or were skilled at it. But by God, by Great Depression, that was an area where white-tailed deer almost went extinct during the Great Depression. Is what they say. And that's when they started implementing game laws a lot all over. It's because during the Great Depression, people were depending on that overhunting almost everywhere, and they had to. What was I going to say about white-tailed deer? So 50 million. Wait, how many million white-tailed deer are there? They estimate between 30 and 50 million or something like that. Let's say 50 million. I know that 5 or 6 million are hunted each year. So let's say it's 50 million. Let's say it's not. Let's say 50 million. That would be 10%, right? Let's say about 15%. I'm not going to do precise math. Say 15% of its population gets wiped out each year. Now, we're not counting automobile accidents and stuff like that. Just hunting. These are just tags, receipts from the tags that are used, that are turned in. Because you have to tear it off and turn it in if you use that tag. Otherwise, you just keep it, and it's not valid for the next year, but you just keep it. You wasted the $50 or whatever. Now, so I think it's like 5 or 6 million white-tailed deer are harvested. That's what they call it. Harvested each year. It's 15% of its population. No, let's look at. They say that the buffalo, the American bison, were hunted out, almost to extinction, just from hunting. They saw the ignorant white man came, and those ignorant cowboys came, and they just mowed them all down. Now, you got a couple things happening here. Son of a bitch! Like I said, a bee got me. Now, I have to cut that out. Now, you got a couple things happen with American bison. They had new lands that were opening up to what? Cattle grazing. So they're going to be in competition with cattle for the graze. So you had overgrazing in all these lands. You didn't have proper management, grazing management of it. So they're, a traditional bovine. I mean, they can interbreed with American bison. So it's going to be safe to say that their habits and their food, their browsing habits are going to be similar, close enough to where they're going to be in competition for browse and stuff, which they are. And their diseases are going to cross over. And what they had was, there was a couple other things that were happening at this time. There was a major brucellosis outbreak among American cattle herds in the mid-1800s. It wiped out a lot of cattle. Also crossed over and wiped out, and it's not cataloged, but we don't understand how many cattle it wiped out. It was very, very hard on the cattle herds to the west at that time. It wasn't really cataloged how many American bison it wiped out, but they're so similar. We can only think that, we do know that it did affect them, and we can only think that it was in similar severity. So the impact on the bison herds by that brucellosis outbreak was pretty severe. The other thing that happened, of course, there's grazing competition, a brucellosis outbreak. The other thing that happened was the hard winters. You had a couple of just brutal, like apocalyptic winters, 1881 and 1887. And let's say, I think it was like Kansas, in the middle of Kansas, let's say Wichita, got down to like negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it went all the way down into Texas. It got, sub-zero temperatures. And you had a lot of areas that got feet and feet of snow all over that would just bury. And what happened is legendary. And there's photographs of this. It's not just, I'm making it up. No, there's photographs, and you can go and research it and verify it. It's like herds would be frozen stiff in the field, like cattle would be frozen stiff in the field. I've seen that myself, not cattle, but I've been up, up north where we had brutal winters, like some of these recent winters. It's actually been pretty mild for a while, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was brutal, like negative 30 and stuff. And I went out, and it's like, what do the wildlife do? Usually they just bed down, they burrow or whatever. When you're talking about stuff like that, it's going to kill a lot of things off. And I saw a coyote in the middle of the field, and it was frozen, standing up. It was frozen solid, standing up there. It was creepy as hell. Now, you had the same thing in 1881 and 1887 with herds of cattle, that they would freeze solid where they stood. And of course, when there's like diaries and writings about this, about when everything thawed out in the summer, and you'd have floods, of course, spring floods, and it'd be you have creeks and waterways clogged with these bloated corpses of all these cattle, thousands and thousands of cattle, in buffalo too, because buffalo, even though they are a wild animal and they can survive harsh conditions, they froze solid alongside the commercial cattle. And that wiped out quite a bit. That was like really, really hard on the bison. Almost wiped them out completely. That was kind of the coup de grace on the bison. Now people say, oh, well, we're told in school that white man bad. And they just ignorantly shot and wiped out all the bison. Now, you had to start with 100 million bison. Right? And by the time, let's say, white settlement got to Mississippi, you drove pretty much all the game and stuff out of there. Say Let's say it was down to 60 million. Everything west of the Mississippi. That's being generously low. Excuse me. So of that, that's when we usually think about the bison and being hunted out was the old west, right? An expansion of the west of the Mississippi. So we'd say 60 million in the American West. And okay, of course, the white pioneers came and shot out all the buffalo over a period of 10 years or whatever. And like I said, American whitetail deliberately, with modern population numbers of humans, 5 or 6 million get shot every year. So that's, oh, shit, that motherfucker's rabid. Son of a bitch. There's a rabid squirrel. This squirrel acting weird. Get a rock or something. Fuck that. All right, might have to cut that out. So you don't want to get bit by a rabid animal. You got 5 or 6 million white-tailed deer shot every year out of a population of what? 50 million. Right, so maybe 40 million. Let's say you get 12-15% of its population wiped out every year, and that's not counting road accidents. Some years I count 2 or 3 dozen deer along roads of Ohio, like in interstates in Ohio. I see. And I always think, what a waste. Some kid could have shot that deer. It would have been his first deer, rather than sitting in some miserable room playing Xbox and crap. But anyways, so 12 to 15% of its population gets killed every year from human predation, from hunters. Okay, so let's say, and they're doing fine. They're thriving. There's more white-tailed deer in America now than there was before, and it's controversial. That's another politically incorrect thing, and it's true because of the habits of that animal and what kind of environment it thrives in. It thrives in clearings and forest clearings where they can look out, can browse, it can look out and see predators, and it can duck down into cover real fast. It's not a deep woods animal, and so you have 15% of its population gets wiped out every year now. But yet, there's more white-tailed deer now than were here before European settlement. Yeah, that's true. And I don't know the exact numbers, but that's an open secret. They don't like to admit it, but they will begrudgingly admit yes, because of the clearings for agriculture and there's all these soybean fields and cornfields. Thanks, vegans. The deer thrive on that kind of environment. Of course, they just come out and eat the soy. Some places they get giant, these soy-fed bucks. Now, that's the kind of animal that thrives on being soy-fed. Now, humans are not. That's the opposite. You feed these bucks that live around these soybean fields. They just come out and snack on that all day long. And then they go back and have a little bedding area in whatever little forested area. You shoot one of those. Tell you what, it tastes like beef because of what it's eating. You can taste it. It's different. But anyways, what was I saying? The predation pressure on white-tailed deer is such that that's not enough to where they're still thriving more than they ever have. So what would wiping out 15% of a herd of 60 million bison be? Every year now. Every year it would have to be wiped out. Well, 10% is 6 million. 15% would be 9 million, right? 9 million a year. 9 million a year. Now, and we have historical records of this, of bison being shot because they were commercially hunted and things like that, of how many were shot. And I think the height of it was like 1874, 1872, something like that, when 5 million were shot, were recorded to be slaughtered. So that's half of what's a healthy management number for white-tailed deer every year. And we're supposed to believe that hunting wiped out American bison? Nope. Sorry, kids, I'm too smart for that. And then here's the other thing. This is the only place you'll ever hear anything like this. Everybody else will go along with the PC nonsense. Oh, we white man wiped out the buffalo, and nothing about brucellosis, nothing about the winters of 81 and 87, and nothing about competition for grazing. Now, hold on a second here, I got some Yahoo. All right. See, this is totally a unique place, and you only hear the truth, the true answers, real analysis, real critical thought. This is a refuge among the detritus that is modern YouTube. Now, you can make a difference and help out by liking or subscribing. Or maybe you even want to donate to the channel. I don't think I have it set up yet. But if you do, just stick around. Hold on a second. Be right back.